Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to SMM Connect. Today's session is entitled Four Unconventional Team Motivation Hacks Every Manager Needs to Know, and our presenter today is Paul Yoachum. Paul leverages 20 years of business experience helping individuals and organizations reach their goals and maximize performance. And folks, this is going to be a great session, and I can't wait. I'm Roger Reitzel, and we're glad you're here. And I'm your producer for today, and I hope you can join us for some more opportunities we have coming up. We've got on October 9th, You Want It This Way, I Want It That Way, and the Backstreet Boys Want It Another Way with Connie Staley. She's going to be great. We have October 10th, another one with Catherine. We've got October 15th with Park Howell. Some great sessions coming up. Please join us. And if you haven't joined us on X, on SMM, that's formerly known as Prince, SMM Connect us, please join us there. And also, SMM Focus reports the topics your counterparts are talking about and thinking about. Join us there too. And special thanks to our sponsor today, Find Mojo. Find Mojo is committed to providing best-in-class assessments and programs that drive sustainable, impactful, and scalable employee engagement results for their clients. So thank you, Find Mojo. And with that, we would like to start our session today. Four unconventional team motivation hacks every manager needs to know. And welcome, Paul. Thank you. We're so glad to have you back.
Hey, excited to be back. Thanks, Roger. I just wish that in my bio intro you could have started it by saying "in a world where," and then gone into the, because you've got such that wonderful voice.
I could have done that. In a world where moose survive.
That's right.
There's all sorts of things I could have done. I'll know that for next time. I will do that for you.
That's our takeaway. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks, Roger, for that great introduction. Love being with the folks from SMM Connect and Training Magazine. And we've got a webinar today that I think is going to be, the title is certainly a mouthful, but I think that it's going to resonate with, if you work with other people, I think you'll find something in our session today that will be kind of something you can take back to your everyday work life. So let's start off here. Now we're going to make this pretty interactive today. I'm going to have you use the chat quite a bit as we go through here. We're going to do this almost as like a workshop. So when you think about it, I want you to think about, if I were to come up to you and say, hey, tell me about your team. Some of you on this call would immediately go to, well, I'm a manager and I have people that report up to me. This is my team. Others on this call think about this in terms of, well, I'm an individual contributor and we report up to a manager. So the team I think about is my team of peers that are at my level, right? So you're somewhere on in this space on the organizational chart. For some of you, that might mean both positions. You might think of the team you sit on as well as the team that reports up to you. The point is this: regardless of where you sit, almost everybody, unless you're an independent coach or consultant, right? Almost everybody is part of a team. And even those folks work with contractors. Their clients become part of their team as they're embedded into organizations. So I think it's a safe and fair statement that everybody is part of a team. So with that backdrop in mind, I want to give everybody a second here. And I would love for you to type in the chat. And Roger, if you wouldn't mind, maybe just interjecting some of the comments that you see. Think of your team. Now that's either, again, the one you sit on or the one that you manage. If you're in both camps, pick one. And then I want you to pick one word, just one word to describe the state of your team right now. Maybe the word thriving comes to mind. Maybe the word trusting or family. For some of you, it might be dysfunction, chaos, stress.
Apprehensive.
Yeah. What are you seeing, Roger? And again, we're not going to share this with your team. This is a safe space. So we're not going to call anybody out specifically.
Stressed, apprehensive, dysfunctional. in flux, understanding, cooperative. Wow. Uncommunicative. Ooch.
Wow. Well, you
Ooch.
know what? These words that are being thrown out here are not uncommon. And this is going to sound crazy and counterintuitive, but it actually excites me because it means that there's an opportunity here. And what we can share with you today, I think, can make some immediate improvements to whatever you consider your team. All right. So keep that word in mind because we're going to dig deeper on that here in just a few minutes when we start to talk about some of the issues that are facing your team. And that's probably what's causing you some of these, causing you the reasons why you would use those words. Let's do another quick quiz here. And this will tie to what we're talking about here. But based on this picture, just looking at this gentleman with this just awesome Ned Flanders-esque mustache, if you're a Simpsons fan, based on this picture alone, is Chris Hadfield a barber, a social psychologist, a fireman from 9/11, an astronaut, or a driver's ed instructor? Let me give you a minute to type in the chat here. And what would you say here? By the way, my youngest son, Roger, is going through driver's education right now. And can we just take a moment and acknowledge that there's not a more dangerous job in the United States than a driver's ed instructor? I don't know how they do it. So that's not a hint, by the way, that he is that. He may or may not be. Well, how many of you selected D? Chris is an astronaut. He's a Canadian astronaut, and he's not just any astronaut. He's a pretty famous astronaut. In fact, Forbes called him the most famous astronaut since Neil Armstrong. That's a pretty, to put him in that camp is pretty big. He did more to generate public interest in space travel than anyone has done for decades. And the reason for this was he was one of the first, I think the first astronaut to utilize social media in space. And he would document himself doing everyday tasks that we take for granted down here on Earth, like putting toothpaste on a toothbrush. Seems pretty simple, right? But when you're in microgravity and the toothpaste floats out of the tube, how do you capture that? How do you make a sandwich, a BLT, right? With the lettuce and the tomatoes floating. And he would document these things like he was running on a treadmill, and he's given TED Talks. He's got a huge following. So most of you probably knew who Chris Hadfield was. If you're from Canada, for sure you knew who he was because he's on the currency. If you didn't know who he was, they're going to revoke your citizenship. I kid. However, what does this have to do with teams? Well, when we interviewed him for some of our work here at Find Mojo, one of the things that fascinated us the most, despite all these cool things he was doing, was we felt his greatest achievement was the way he led his diverse team. Now, when I say diverse team, so there's Chris right there on the right. When you look at the picture here, you think, well, they don't look all that diverse. They're pretty homogenous, right? They look like white males in their mid-30s and 40s. But what you're not seeing here is that everyone in this picture comes from a different country. There's Russians, South Americans, South Africans, Canadians, Americans. They all have different family backgrounds. They have different cultural differences. There's language barriers. There's age differences. And Chris told us, he said, we were in this International Space Station for 6 months, and we never had a major disagreement. We never had a quarrel. Now, I want to pause there for just a second, and I want you to think back to your team. Could you go 6 months in a close, confined space with those people and not want to jettison somebody on your team out into space or jettison yourself out into space, right? So we said, Chris, how did you do this? And he said, we had an unwritten rule on our team. And he said, a lot of what I did to build the team happened before we ever got into space. But we had this unwritten rule that every day a member of the crew had to perform a random act of kindness for another member of the crew. So maybe I'm going to do the dishes and clean up tonight for you so that you can get an extra hour of sleep, or I'm going to run these reports so that you can, focus on this. And we just thought, wow, how amazing. What a great example of taking a diverse team, putting them in a pretty high stakes, high stress situation and having them work together flawlessly. So we wanted to build on that, and we wanted to understand, okay, how was that done? What did you do, Chris? So as we dug into this idea of team dynamics and group dynamics, some of the research that we found is pretty sobering. So you're not alone here in what you're thinking. We interviewed 500 CEOs, and 96% of them said that when something goes south or a workplace failure happens, the project got off track or whatever happened, it was almost always traced back to poor team collaboration. 90% of these same leaders recognize the value of engaged team and actually consider it to be a key driver of success. But when asked, okay, that it's important, how engaged are your teams? Only 24% of these leaders think that their people were actually engaged. In fact, we had one CEO, we asked, how many people work here? He said about half of them. So we weren't sure whether or not he was kidding or joking, but in his mind, only half of his workforce brings their best selves to work. Now, part of the problem is the teams of yesteryear are not like the teams of today. Can anybody recognize this team? So they all look pretty homogenous. They look like they maybe just got back from Woodstock, right, circa 1975. But as you look at this picture, maybe some of you have seen it, type in the chat, does anybody recognize this group of people? Roger, you're welcome to play along.
Yeah, well. I'm trying. It's
Let me
late
look
60s
down
to
in the
mid
left-hand
70s.
corner at the young buck down in the very left-hand corner. Does he look familiar?
Yeah, I see him now.
Did anybody guess Microsoft? This is the founding team of Microsoft. If you had seen this picture in 1975, would you have invested money in Microsoft? Probably not. Well, here's the dilemma. Teams of yesteryear were generally the same. They were comprised of people who were generally the same age, right? It was mostly boomers. They were all located in the same office. They all worked the same hours. There was no internet. Everybody kind of did the